My name is Lindsay Plinus, and I'm going to be talking about the role that the pancreas and the liver play in digestion. The purpose of the assignment is to explain different concepts involving digestion in more depth, basically. All right, so digestion of the pancreas versus the liver. Digestion is accomplished by four basic processes, which the pancreas and liver have a little bit to do with. So digestion, this is the chemical and physical breakdown of food itself. The pancreas and liver both secrete digestive enzymes that help assist in the breakdown of food. Secretion has two meanings when we talk about the pancreas and the liver. The meaning we're going to use is it's a release of substances synthesized by the GI tract's specialized epithelial cells. Absorption, the liver helps with some absorption of starch, actually, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then motility. Motility is basically just the movement of the chyme or the food in the digestive tract throughout the entire digestive tract. Some hormones released from the pancreas aid in motility. We have a couple challenges of digestion as well. These challenges are avoiding autodigestion, meaning that we need to secrete enzymes that are powerful enough to break down the macronutrients, but yet they shouldn't harm our our internal digestive passageways. Also mass balance, so trying just to balance fluid, and then defense, like immune functions and whatnot. So now digestion begins within the oral cavity, then the swallowed food continues down the oral tract into throughout the esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, and then finally it's excreted as waste from the anus. Digestion includes the digestion of carbs, fats, proteins, etc. And accessory gland organs that help aid in digestion are the salivary glands, the gallbladder, and specifically what we'll be talking about is the pancreas and the liver. Now I do want to talk about the pancreas a little bit. So the pancreas is both an exocrine gland, meaning it produces enzymes, and it's also an endocrine gland, meaning it produces hormones. It secretes lots of different things to aid in digestion, which I'll talk about each one in a little bit. First, there's peptidase. So peptidase is basically a pancreatic enzyme that helps digest proteins or peptides into smaller amino acid sequences. Pancreatic lipase helps digest fats within the small intestine, which is aided by bile secreted by the liver, which we'll talk about. And then pancreatic lipase is also secreted into the small intestine to help with starch digestion. Bicarbonate is a non-enzymic substance, actually, and it's secreted by the pancreas as well into the small intestine through the pancreatic duct to help buffer and neutralize acidic chyme coming from the stomach into the small intestine. The pancreas also secretes endopeptidases. It secretes endopeptidases of trypsin and chymotrypsin, and then it secretes an exopeptidase of carboxypeptidase. Things that act on the pancreas are the GI peptides CCK, secretin, GIP, and GLP-1. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of those hormones and why they act on the pancreas now. So CCK, let's see where I have my notes on CCK. CCK stimulates the gallbladder's contraction and pancreatic enzyme secretion to basically help inhibit gastric emptying and acid secretion. So when CCK increases, it helps stimulate digestion, basically, within the small intestine. When secretin is released, secretin is from the duodenum, part of the small intestine, that acts on the pancreas to stimulate the secretion of pancreatic juices and bicarbonate, helping buffer the chyme. And this occurs directly, basically, when chyme enters the small intestine. That's when secretin is released to release the bicarbonate right into the small intestine as well. GIP and GLP, these are also known as incretin hormones. Basically, these are released if a meal contains carbohydrates. Both hormones are part of feed-forward mechanisms to help promote insulin release from the endocrine pancreas, and it also helps cells prepare for the glucose to uptake it and absorb it that's about to be consumed. So they allow entry of food into the intestine, and they also decrease gastric motility and acid secretion, so they help with digestion again. Gastric inhibitory peptide specifically, so GIP, this stimulates insulin release from the pancreas in response to glucose in the intestinal lumen. So this also promotes digestion, inhibits gastric emptying and secretion. The pancreas manufactures and secretes the insulin hormone from the endocrine pancreas in response to increased glucose levels. The insulin helps glucose get uptake into cells, and it also helps it get stored and decrease the blood sugar and return it to normal levels. Now, if there's too low blood sugar, the pancreas releases what's called glucagon, which is the hormone that opposes insulin. Now, glucagon acts, basically, it takes glycogen out of cells, the storage form of carbs, and it's broken down further into glucose to be put in the blood so it can raise glucose levels back into normal level. So insulin controls high blood sugar levels, and then glucagon controls low blood sugar levels. And then finally, glucagon-like peptide 1, so GLP-1, it works together with GIP to do the whole feed forwarding mechanism in order to secrete insulin from the pancreas to prepare for the glucose absorption. And something to note about GLP-1 is it also promotes satiety. So the hepatic portal system. So it's important to note that venous blood from the digestive tract doesn't actually directly go back straight to the heart, but it actually passes through the liver first through the hepatic portal system. So the liver really acts as a filter for all different nutrients, and once the liver is done filtering out all the nutrients, then it returns that blood back to the heart, and it can be recirculated, and it goes through the entire process again. So the liver really has blood vessels running to the entire digestive tract of the stomach, the small and large intestines, the pancreas, and also the spleen. Things that are made in the liver are bile, cholesterol, glycogen, and hepcidin. Now, I talked about hepcidin, that it helps uptake iron, so mineral or a protein, so it helps in mineral absorption. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose, so the liver uptakes glucose and makes it into the storage form of glycogen. Now, cholesterol is formed from fats that get returned to the liver. The liver actually manufactures the cholesterol, and then it also breaks it down. When the liver breaks down cholesterol, it actually breaks it down into bile salts, and it can be recycled to use with fat digestion again, or it can be excreted as waste products. So the bile that is manufactured in the liver contains lots of different fat enzymes, basically. And now when the bile is manufactured, it's not necessarily manufactured on demand, but it's stored in another organ, and it's waiting to be secreted when it's needed. So the bile is stored in the gallbladder, and then whenever it is needed, whenever it becomes stimulated by different GI peptides, then bile is secreted into the small intestine and can emulsify fats to aid in digestion. Things that act on the liver are the GIP and GLP-1. GI peptides, again, we talked about this earlier. It helps stimulate insulin. And let's see if I have anything else to say. That's pretty much it for this slide. Alright, so we'll talk about the role of the pancreas and liver on macronutrient digestion. First, we'll talk about fats. So the liver aids in fat digestion from manufactured bile, which we talked about. And then the exocrine pancreas secretes that digestive enzyme, pancreatic lipase. For carbohydrates, they don't really aid in digestion so much, the liver and the pancreas, but they mostly aid in the absorption and control of blood glucose. So the liver aids in carbohydrate storage after digestion, and it also helps with glucose absorption by converting the glucose into the storage form of glycogen. And then the exocrine pancreas secretes the digestive enzyme pancreatic amylase to help break down starches. The endocrine pancreas secretes the hormone insulin and glucagon, which help control the glucose uptake into cells and maintain blood sugar. So there is those aspects there with carbohydrate digestion. Proteins are a little more complex. So proteins are also called peptides, or they're the same thing. Proteins are peptides. And peptides are secreted by specialized epithelium that may act as either hormones or paracrines. Oops. Products of protein digestion include amino acids and small peptides. Different GI peptides include peptidase from pancreas, cholecystokinin, which is CCK, secretin, which we talked about those two earlier, gastric inhibitory peptide, gastric-like peptide 1, and motilin. We talked about all of these things basically besides motilin. Motilin is a GI peptide secreted from the small intestine, and increases in motilin are associated with migrating motor complex. It's basically the large contraction of the small intestine to move the wastes towards the anus. It's a bunch of segments of the large intestine mixing food together and pushing it forward. Motilin acts on the endocrine pancreas. That's the significance here. I skipped the enzymes for protein digestion. Enzymes for protein digestion include endopeptidases, which include trypsin and chymotrypsin, like I mentioned before, and exopeptidases. Endopeptidases are also called proteases. These guys break peptide change into smaller fragments, so like smaller amino acids. And the difference is exopeptidases, these chop off an amino acid one by one on either end. So they just don't break the fragments right in the center. They chop each amino acid off by the ends. Nucleic acid polymers of RNA and DNA are proteins as well. These are digested by pancreatic enzymes and intestinal enzymes. And mineral absorption, we talked about the role of the liver with the uptake of iron. Just some extra information that I didn't really mention too much. I already mentioned the liver is a biological filter for nutrients. The liver, I did talk about the cholesterol actually, so the liver manufactures cholesterol from fats and breaks down cholesterol. It's important to note that most GI peptide secretion does arise from ingestion of food. So just when you ingest food, naturally all these GI peptide secretions that stimulate different digestive enzymes and hormones, it's all naturally going to occur just by ingesting food. And I also talked about the pancreas secreting bicarbonate, so I have touched on everything. I guess basically just to conclude, the liver and the pancreas are both involved in some way, shape, or form in the digestion of all macronutrients, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates.